family of Lindani Myeni want answers. The 29-year-old Richards Bay-born rugby player was shot dead by Honolulu police a few weeks ago. His remains were returned to the country at the weekend, and the family is preparing for his funeral. Our U.S. correspondent William Denselow has travelled to Honolulu to tell us about developments in the story. I believe you've just arrived, so it's probably premature to ask what you've found, but what have you been hearing in the build-up to your arrival?
Well, Jane, first of all, where I am behind me is the scene of where that fatal shooting took place a couple of weeks ago. And since arriving here in Honolulu, we've spoken to the legal team representing Lindani Myeni. Now, Jim Bickerton, the attorney, has really laid out a few things they want to see from the police department, from the city of Honolulu, going forward in the coming days. What they want to see is more body cam footage to be released earlier on in the incidents, to go beyond that minute or so video that has already been released by Honolulu's police department so far. They want to see the release of internal dialogue between the police during that call-out for that reported robbery, that burglary that they were responding to. They want to see the release of those transcripts and some of that audio to be released. And a key thing that the legal team representing Mr. Myeni is calling for is that they want to see the release of his mobile phone that they say is still in police custody. They say that could help establish a narrative. They say that it's a possibility that Mr. Myeni entered this building you can see behind me here, thinking it was perhaps a nearby temple. He said that could potentially explain why he did things like take his shoes off. So that is something that the legal team want to see, as they hope to try and establish a narrative just to exactly help explain Mr. Myeni's actions. Of course, we've heard from his wife, who's come out and said that there was no way that this was a burglary in her opinion. That explains why would he take his shoes off. So that is something very clearly that the legal team want to see going forward. We have reached out to Honolulu's police department. They say that the police investigation is ongoing, and they say they were not willing to provide an interview at this stage.
Yeah, I mean, I know there are calls for DIRCO here in South Africa to get involved, and I'm just wondering if you are hearing what sort of conversations are being held between both countries.
Well, absolutely. Of course, this is something that the legal team here isn't particularly privy to. They understand that there has been contact made back in South Africa. The legal team wondered whether conversations could potentially be made between the US State Department and law enforcement here in Honolulu. And while there are issues when it comes to jurisdictions, the legal team here wonder whether the US State Department could potentially lend a little bit of pressure to try and expedite the process of getting some of their requests through and help to move in a more expedient manner. That is the conversation coming through. We also understand that what we could see in potentially the next 24 hours or so is more of a legal action to try and get those personal belongings from Mr. Myeni back into the hands of the legal team to at least see, so they can start to try and build a better understanding of a potential narrative that took place on April 14th.
And, you know, I mean, we're not sure yet the entirety, what actually happened, but here is another case of police brutality against a black person.
Well, that's absolutely right. What we're hearing from civil rights attorneys here in Honolulu is that while all the facts of this case are still very much ongoing, of course, we've heard from the police that they say that there was not an overreaction as far as the police were concerned. That the suspect didn't get on the ground when they asked him to do that. So that is the message very strongly from law enforcement here in Hawaii. But civil rights attorneys we've spoken to say there are a couple of discrepancies that they want to see explained further, such as why law enforcement didn't introduce themselves as law enforcement when they arrived on the scene. So they want clear questions of that. And of course, speaking to some of these legal experts here in Honolulu, their message is there are certainly strong parallels going back across the United States, incidents such as the shooting death of George Floyd, and they want to see further accountability both here from the police department here in Honolulu, and of course a narrative that we're seeing play far and wide across the United States, even here in the furthest flung reaches of the US.